The call came at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday, 6 months and 8 days after they restructured my position. Klaus Brenner, heavy German accent, very polite. "Mr. Morrison, we have discovered a significant problem with Keystone Steel's compliance status. Are you available to discuss?" I was drinking coffee in my little office above O'Sullivan's pub, watching the sunrise over the Pittsburgh Steel District. 6 months earlier, I had been Keystone's compliance officer. Now, I was about to find out they'd made a $285 million mistake. My name's Hugh Morrison, 48, and I've been keeping steel manufacturing companies legally compliant for 10 years. Before that, I spent 16 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, making sure dams didn't fail and bridges didn't collapse. Same principle, different uniform. When something breaks in civil engineering, communities suffer. When compliance breaks in steel manufacturing, companies die. The day that started this whole mess was a Tuesday, too. Austin Caldwell walked into our quarterly safety meeting and called my compliance team legacy friction with outdated operational overhead. I knew right then Keystone Steel was heading for a cliff. Austin had that entitled MBA energy you see everywhere now. Expensive suit, Apple Watch, and the kind of confidence that comes from never actually failing at anything that mattered. CEO's nephew, newly appointed VP of Digital Transformation, whatever that meant, in a 98-year-old steel manufacturing company. He didn't shake hands when introduced. He gave finger waves and said things like disruptive innovation and operational agility, while sipping a $15 green smoothie like he'd invented efficiency. Nobody asked him to present that day. Nobody stopped him either. He clicked through a PowerPoint titled Streamlining Legacy Functions, Phase 1. Phase 1, it turned out, was gutting my department. I'd been Keystone's named SOC2 compliance officer for 10 years. That's 10 years of building safety protocols from scratch, watching regulatory changes sweep through steel manufacturing like hurricanes, documenting every nightmare scenario the EPA, OSHA, and DASOT could throw at us. I had 4 external audits under my belt with 0 violations. My filing cabinets were organized like an Army logistics system. Everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. Austin didn't even know what SOC2 meant. I watched him Google it during the meeting. That morning, he stood there grinning, with his uncle's company credit card, called Compliance and Outdated Support Function, and suggested we automate oversight using AI solutions. My department was redundant, he said, overstaffed. My $72,000 salary plus $10,500 in benefits eliminated. That's $82,500 in annual savings, he bragged. Almost a full marketing budget upgrade. Someone actually clapped. I didn't. I just capped my pen and asked, "Are we done here?" Austin left with his spreadsheet and a satisfied little nod. I went back to my office and opened a fresh binder. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even surprise. It was protocol, military habit. When someone's about to make a catastrophic mistake, you document everything and prepare for damage control. I started backing up files. Every access credential, every compliance designation, every legal document where my name appeared as the responsible authority. Most people at Keystone didn't realize our entire regulatory framework still required my formal signature. Every quarterly filing, every safety certification, every audit response had Hugh Morrison listed as primary contact. No replacement had been designated. Nobody could replace me without board approval and formal reassignment paperwork filed within 21 calendar days. But Austin didn't know that. His uncle Charles, the CEO, probably didn't either. At first I thought someone would pump the brakes. Maybe HR would hesitate. Maybe Charles, who once called me the guy who keeps us out of federal prison, might speak up. But nothing. HR sent the reclassification paperwork 4 days later. My new title, Senior Administrative Coordinator. My security clearance was downgraded. My invitations to leadership meetings disappeared overnight. I nodded, no complaints, even congratulated Austin when he bragged about hitting his first efficiency target. He actually gave me a thumbs up and called me Hugh M. So I printed the original SOC2 designation letter, the one signed by the board in 2019, and emailed it to my personal account with a timestamp. Then I printed 2 copies. One went into my home filing cabinet, the other into a binder labeled Regulatory Continuity, Archive Only, and quietly placed it in the legal department's storage room. Fourth shelf, left side. I didn't tell anyone. See, people think revenge needs to be loud, dramatic exits and angry speeches about being unappreciated. But nobody appreciates a landmine either until someone steps on it. The real beauty was in Section 12.3 of our business continuity plan, a clause I'd added 4 years ago after watching a competitor get hammered with $3.8 million in fines for improper compliance handoffs. It stated that any change to the named compliance officer must be formally reassigned by board resolution within 21 calendar days, or the designation becomes legally invalid retroactive to the vacancy date. Steel manufacturing compliance fines start at $8,000 per day for minor violations. After 90 days of continued violation, they escalate to $25,000 per day. The math gets ugly fast. Austin had no idea. Legal hadn't checked. Charles just signed off on the efficiency report without reading the details. 6 weeks after the streamlining, I submitted my resignation. Clean and simple. Effective. 14 days from today, I will be stepping down from my position at Keystone Steel Manufacturing. That's it. No drama, no exit interview demands, no company-wide email about being undervalued. They processed it like routine paperwork, disabled my access by end of day. The IT ticket was so rushed they misspelled my name and forgot to update the compliance registry. My son Danny called that night to check on me. He's a junior at Carnegie Mellon studying mechanical engineering. Smart kid, smarter than his old man in most ways. But he inherited my attention to detail. Dad, you sure about this? What about my tuition? Spring semester's coming up. Trust me, son. This is going to work out. Your old man didn't spend 16 years in the Army Corps without learning how to plan for contingencies. Sounds like you've got something up your sleeve. Just following proper procedures. Sometimes that's all it takes. That weekend, I updated my profile on the Federal Compliance Registry, setting my certification to active, executive designation relinquished, no replacement filed, effective day 28. Then I registered as an independent consultant specializing in crisis compliance recovery. 24 hours later, my phone started ringing. By Monday, I had 4 serious inquiries, 2 from law firms representing companies in regulatory trouble, 1 from a boutique consulting group, and 1 from a German steel conglomerate that specialized in acquiring American mid-market manufacturers. That last one made me smile. Across town, Keystone hummed along without missing a beat. No exit procedures, no knowledge transfer, no replacement training. Austin was already planning phase 2 of his optimization strategy. Charles started talking about the company's new agility mindset in industry interviews. Nobody noticed the compliance clock ticking toward day 22. I set up shop in a small office above O'Sullivan's Pub on Liberty Avenue. 2 desks, a coffee maker that worked half the time, and a view of the old J&L Steelworks. Rent was $900 a month. My first consulting contract paid $275 per hour. The math worked better than my old salary. Every morning, I'd walk downstairs and get coffee from Patrick, old Irish guy who'd run the place for 35 years. We'd talk about the Steelers, the weather, sometimes about business. He knew I'd left Keystone, but didn't pry. Military guys understand when someone doesn't want to talk about work. You know, Hugh, Patrick said one morning, my grandfather worked the blast furnaces at Homestead. 43 years, never missed a day. When they tore down those stacks, he said something I'll never forget. What's that? The young ones think they can build better than the old ones, but they never ask why the old ones built it that way in the first place. Day 43 of Keystone's compliance violation. I got a call from a steel fabrication company in Ohio. Their compliance officer had quit without notice, and they were facing a regulatory audit in 5 weeks. Panic mode. I quoted them $340 per hour, plus expenses for a 4-week emergency engagement. They said yes before I finished the sentence. Day 67, I was on a plane to Texas, helping a steel processing plant navigate an EPA investigation. Their previous compliance team had missed a filing deadline. The potential fines were in the millions. My job was to reconstruct their documentation trail and prove good faith compliance efforts, military precision and attention to detail. Same skills, different battlefield. Day 89, the escalating fine structure kicked in for Keystone. Not that anyone there knew it yet. Steel manufacturing compliance violations become exponentially more expensive after 90 days. The daily penalty jumped from $8,000 to $25,000, still invisible, still accumulating, still retroactive. To day 22. Day 95, I was back in Pittsburgh when Danny called with news. He'd been accepted into Carnegie Mellon's Accelerated Compliance Engineering program. New field, growing demand, excellent job prospects. Guess who inspired me to look into it, he said. Your old man's rubbing off on you. More like I realize there's job security in keeping people out of trouble. Plus, the starting salaries are really good. Professor says with all these international companies buying American steel plants, they need people who understand both sides. Danny was right. The steel industry was changing. Foreign companies with deep pockets were snapping up American manufacturers, but they needed local expertise to navigate federal regulations. Someone who understood both the technical requirements and the business impact. Day 120, Keystone announced the deal of the century. Press release went out at 9 a.m. Keystone Steel Manufacturing to be acquired by Braun Steel Industries for $285 million. The story made the Pittsburgh Business Times front page. Charles was quoted extensively about Keystone's innovative operational transformation under new leadership. Austin was quoted too. He'd positioned himself as the architect of Keystone's lean operational model that attracted international attention. The article mentioned his strategic elimination of redundant legacy functions as a key factor in Braun's interest. I read it over my morning coffee at O'Sullivan's. Patrick saw me smiling at the newspaper. Good news? He asked. You could say that. Sometimes patience pays off. My grandfather used to say something else about the steel business. The furnace that burns hottest melts the steel, but if you don't tend the fire right, the whole thing comes down. Day 135. The due diligence team from Braun Steel Industries arrived in Pittsburgh, professional, thorough, and led by a woman named Dr. Ingrid Weber, who spoke 5 languages and had the kind of attention to detail that made German engineering legendary. Her team included Klaus Brenner, a compliance specialist who'd spent 17 years auditing American acquisitions for European steel companies. They spent the first week reviewing financial records, operational metrics, and safety protocols. Everything looked clean. Austin had prepared beautiful presentations about streamlined operations and reduced overhead. The numbers were impressive. The timeline was aggressive. Charles had already started talking about integration plans. Braun executives were optimistic. This looked like exactly the kind of lean, efficient American steel manufacturer they wanted in their portfolio. Keystone's management team was confident. Legal had reviewed everything twice. The deal was on track for closing in 2 weeks. Day 149. Exactly 21 compliance cycles since my designation had been terminated without replacement. Klaus Brenner was in Keystone's legal archive room, cross-referencing regulatory filings with personnel records. Routine due diligence, nothing unusual. He wasn't looking for problems, just verifying that all certifications were current and properly maintained. That's when he found my binder, 4th shelf, left side, exactly where I'd left it 4 months earlier. Regulatory continuity, archive only. Klaus opened it and started reading. The original SOC2 designation letter, the business continuity plan with section 12.3 highlighted, the timeline requirements, the board resolution from 2019 that was never superseded. Klaus spent an hour going through every document. Then he cross-referenced the dates with Keystone's current compliance registry. Then he called Dr. Weber. The math was simple and brutal. Day 22 through day 148 equals 127 days of compliance violation. First 90 days at $8,000 per day equals $720,000. Remaining 37 days at $25,000 per day equals $925,000. Total exposure, $1,645,000, and climbing at $25,000 per day until resolved. But it got worse. Because no replacement had been designated, every regulatory filing, every safety certification, every compliance document submitted during those 127 days was legally invalid. Keystone had been misrepresenting its regulatory standing to customers, insurers, and potential buyers for over 4 months, including Braun Steel Industries. Day 149, Thursday morning, 9:15 a.m. Klaus Brenner walked into the Keystone boardroom, carrying a folder that would destroy everything Austin had built. "Who is Hugh Morrison?" he asked, setting the folder on the conference table. Austin looked confused. "He used to work here. We restructured his position last year as part of our operational optimization. But he is still listed as your named SOC2 compliance officer," Klaus said, opening the folder. "According to your federal registry and this documentation, he remains the designated authority for all regulatory filings." Charles leaned forward. "That's impossible. We handled his transition months ago." Klaus wasn't smiling. "Where is the board resolution replacing him? The formal reassignment documentation? The updated federal notifications?" Silence. Austin started typing frantically on his phone. Charles was already reaching for his. Legal was called out of another meeting. HR scrambled to find records that didn't exist. "We assumed the transition was automatic when we restructured his role," someone from HR offered weakly. Klaus shook his head. "Federal compliance designations are never automatic. They require explicit board action and formal replacement within 21 calendar days. You have been operating without valid compliance authority for exactly 127 days, over 6 complete compliance cycles." Dr. Weber, who had been quietly reviewing Klaus's findings, looked up from her laptop. "This represents a material misrepresentation of regulatory standing during preliminary negotiations." Austin tried to salvage the situation. "It's just paperwork. We can fix this in a day, bring Hugh back, file the forms, move forward." "No," Dr. Weber said firmly. "You cannot retroactively fix federal compliance violations. Steel manufacturing compliance fines escalate after 90 days. Your current exposure is $1,645,000, increasing by $25,000 daily." The room went dead quiet. Charles's face had gone gray. "Surely we can resolve this. It's a procedural oversight." Klaus opened his laptop and turned the screen toward the table. "Your compliance violations create significant liability exposure for any acquiring entity. But more concerning is the pattern of misrepresentation. Mr. Morrison left detailed documentation showing that proper procedures were available and ignored." He clicked to the next slide. "Section 12.3 of your own business continuity plan, authored by Mr. Morrison, explicitly outlines the 21-day requirement. This was not an oversight. This was negligence." Austin's voice cracked slightly. "We didn't see that documentation." "It was filed in your legal archive with clear labeling," Klaus replied. "Mr. Morrison followed proper procedure. Your organization did not." Dr. Weber closed her laptop slowly. "This is a material breach of due diligence representations. We need to pause acquisition proceedings pending legal review." Charles stood up abruptly. "Dr. Weber, surely we can work through this. The deal is scheduled to close next week." "Mr. Caldwell, your company has been operating in federal violation for over 4 months while representing full compliance to potential buyers. This creates exposure for Braun Steel Industries that we cannot accept." Austin tried one more time. "What if we bring Hugh back immediately? Full reinstatement, whatever it takes." Klaus consulted his notes. "Mr. Morrison is listed as an independent consultant. He may not be available for employment." That afternoon, Klaus called me directly. "Professional courtesy," he said. "Wanted to understand the timeline of my departure and the transition procedures that were supposed to be followed. I was in my office above O'Sullivan's working on a compliance manual for a client in Michigan. The call was expected. I'd been counting days on my calendar, watching the violation accumulate like compound interest. "Mr. Morrison, this is Klaus Brenner from Braun Steel Industries. We are reviewing Keystone Steel's regulatory standing as part of acquisition due diligence." "Yes, sir. How can I help you? Can you confirm the timeline of your departure and any transition procedures that were implemented?" I gave him the dates: restructured on day 1, resigned effective day 42, final day 56. Explained the proper procedures, confirmed that no formal replacement had ever been designated. When he asked if I'd attempted to notify Keystone of the compliance gap, I mentioned the binder. "Regulatory continuity. Archive only," I told him. "4th shelf, left side in legal storage. Should still be there." "We found it," Klaus said. "Very thorough documentation. Section 12.3 of the business continuity plan appears to address this exact scenario." "Yes, sir. I wrote that clause in 2019 after watching a competitor get hit with $3.8 million in fines for improper compliance handoff. Seemed like prudent risk management? Indeed. Are you currently available for consulting engagement? Depends on the scope and timeline. What did you have in mind? Day 150, Friday morning. Dr. Weber called an emergency meeting. Charles, Austin, the board, legal counsel, everyone who mattered. She laid out the situation in terms that left no room for interpretation. Keystone Steel has been operating in violation of federal compliance requirements for 127 days. The regulatory fines currently total $1,245,000 and increase by $25,000 daily until resolved. Austin started to interrupt. Dr. Weber held up her hand. Furthermore, every compliance document submitted during this period is legally invalid. This includes safety certifications, environmental filings, and regulatory representations made to Braun Steel Industries during preliminary negotiations. Charles's voice was barely a whisper. What does this mean for the acquisition? It means the acquisition is terminated, Dr. Weber said flatly. Effective immediately. Our legal team has identified material misrepresentation that creates unacceptable liability exposure. Austin looked like he was going to be sick. Surely we can resolve this. Bring Hugh back, fix the paperwork, move forward. Trust has been compromised, Dr. Weber replied. Mr. Morrison provided proper documentation and procedures. Your organization chose to ignore them. This was not an oversight. This was a failure of corporate governance. The Braun team was packed and gone by noon. Their final act was to formally notify Keystone's board that due diligence had revealed material compliance violations and misrepresentation of regulatory standing. The press release went out Monday morning. Braun Steel Industries withdraws from Keystone Steel acquisition due to unresolved regulatory compliance issues. Keystone stock opened down 19% and kept falling. By market close, it had dropped 33% in a single day. The business press picked up the story immediately. Headlines like, "Compliance failure kills $285 million deal," and "When cost-cutting goes wrong." Tuesday morning, my phone rang again. Dr. Weber this time. "Mr. Morrison, Braun Steel Industries is interested in retaining your services for a comprehensive compliance review of our North American operations. 16-month contract, $275 per hour. Full autonomy over methodology and timeline. Are you available?" I looked around my little office, coffee maker that worked half the time, view of the steel district, and a stack of consulting contracts that had tripled my old salary. "Yes, ma'am, I'm available." Day 153, Wednesday afternoon. Charles Caldwell announced his early retirement, effective immediately. The press release cited personal reasons and desire to spend time with family. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership transitions and operational restructuring. Austin was asked to submit his resignation by Friday. No press release for that one. Thursday morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hugh, this is Austin. Hope we can connect about industry best practices. No hard feelings." I read it twice, then deleted it. The local business press had picked up the story. Pittsburgh Business Times ran a feature titled, "The $285 million Mistake, How Keystone Steel Lost the Deal of a Lifetime." They interviewed compliance experts, corporate lawyers, and business school professors. Everyone had opinions about proper due diligence and the importance of regulatory oversight. Nobody interviewed me. That was fine. I had work to do. Danny called that weekend, excited about his acceptance into Carnegie Mellon's compliance engineering program. He'd been following the Keystone story in the business news. "Dad, they're using this as a case study in my business law class. Professor says it's a perfect example of how cutting corners on compliance can destroy shareholder value. What's your take on it? That someone at Keystone knew exactly what they were doing when they wrote those procedures, and someone else ignored them because they thought they knew better. Smart kid. Your old man's proud of you. I've been thinking about specializing in steel manufacturing compliance. Professor says the field's growing, especially with all the international acquisitions happening. Good choice. There's always demand for people who can keep companies out of trouble." 6 months later, I moved into my new office at Braun Steel Industries North American headquarters in Pittsburgh. Corner office, 17th floor. View of the Monongahela River. My assignment was simple: review compliance procedures for all bronze U.S. steel facilities, and recommend improvements. The work was familiar, but the scale was impressive. 11 manufacturing plants across 7 states, each with different regulatory requirements and local compliance challenges. Braun wanted a unified system that could handle federal oversight, state regulations, and international standards. Keystone Steel was officially delisted from the Pittsburgh Stock Exchange. The company had been sold in pieces to various buyers, none of whom wanted the compliance liability that came with the corporate entity. The original headquarters building was leased to a tech startup. Most of the manufacturing equipment went to a competitor in Ohio. The final regulatory settlement was announced the following week. Keystone's insurance covered most of the $2.3 million in fines, but the company's reputation was finished. Charles moved to Florida. Austin's LinkedIn profile said he was exploring new opportunities in operational excellence consulting. 1 year later, I was sitting in my Braun office reviewing the final compliance report. 11 facilities, unified procedures, 0 regulatory violations, projected annual savings of $2.1 million through improved efficiency and reduced legal exposure. Dr. Weber had already asked about extending the contract. Braun was expanding their U.S. operations and wanted me to help evaluate potential acquisitions. My phone buzzed with a text from Danny. He'd just finished his junior year and was starting a summer internship with a compliance consulting firm in Philadelphia. Following in Dad's footsteps, he wrote, "Turns out there really is job security in keeping people out of trouble." That evening, I walked down to O'Sullivan's for coffee. Patrick was closing up, but poured me a cup anyway. "How's the new job?" he asked. "Can't complain. Turns out experience is worth something after all. Funny how that works. You know what my grandfather used to say about the steel business? What's that? The man who knows why the furnace was built that way will always have work. The man who thinks he can build it better without asking why will always be looking for work. Some people spend their careers trying to be seen. I spent mine knowing where the emergency exits were located. My mistake at Keystone was assuming someone else would read the safety manual when I left. They didn't replace me, they erased me. And like any good safety protocol, the consequences were built right into the system. Austin had called compliance legacy friction with outdated operational overhead. Turns out legacy knowledge is what keeps companies alive when the regulations change and the lawyers come calling. Business is good, really good. Just took them $285 million to figure that out.